we proceeded along on that line, and then in 2021, the committee at the time, I don't believe the committee at the time said, upon the application of one of the members, said, let's have a review of this requirement on retail cannabis outlets and how many should be in any certain area. And we put that on our list, and we haven't had a chance to get to it yet. And it's still on the list, and we want to take it off. So we want to bring this back to committee for discussion. And Mr. Garish has a presentation that he's prepared to present, and then we'll have some discussion about it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Newell. Mr. Garish, are you ready?
Yes, we are. Thank you. And I'll pass this over to Mr. Wong to do the presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so just a bit of background.
Hold it. Can we make that presentation bigger?
Perfect.
A magic finger.
What's that? Okay, so just a bit of quick background into this subject. As mentioned, so in 2018, the Cannabis Act was given a royal assent, and following that time, the provincial government had given information on how local governments play a role in regulating retail cannabis sales within their jurisdiction. So this really put us into a position where we had to decide how we wanted to regulate retail cannabis sales within our jurisdiction. We presented the Planning and Development Committee at their meeting of August 16th, 2018, 4 different options that they had to regulate retail cannabis within the regional district. The first of which being to permit retail cannabis sales in any zone where retail is permitted. So typically we would see this in commercial or town and village center zones. Another option was to limit zones in which retail cannabis sales is a permitted use. The third option would have been to regulate retail cannabis through a temporary use permit. And lastly, we did have the option to prohibit retail cannabis sales in all zones. And as CAO Newell did mention, we did end up resolving to, having an issue with the clicker here, permit retail cannabis in any zone where retail is a permitted use.
Does that complete your?
No,
not yet. Not just yet.
No, they're trying to get the screen to change.
Thank you.
There we go.
So between 2018 and 2021, we did receive 4 different referrals for cannabis licenses in the regional district, one of which being in Area C, so that was near Gallagher Lake, and 3 of them being in the Okanagan Falls area in Electoral Area D. As CAO Newell did mention, a notice of motion was made at a board meeting on May 6, 2021 to amend the zoning of retail cannabis stores in Electoral Area D. And this was in response to those 3 different referrals for cannabis retail stores in that area between that time, with the concern particularly being that multiple cannabis retail stores would be operating at the same time there. And this project was deferred to 2023 and is coming back now. So we are presenting the Planning and Development Committee then with the same 4 options that were presented to them in 2018 when considering this as a region as a whole. So just in consideration of the limited resources that we have in completing the current project list, we do recommend option 1, which would be to maintain the status quo. So to permit retail cannabis in any zone where retail is permitted within Electoral Area D. We also do believe that there is merit in reviewing our current processing procedure. The Provincial Cannabis Control and Licensing Act outlines the different public consultation requirements, which must be undertaken when a local government provides comments and recommendations to the BC Liquor and Cannabis Branch. And one of these methods which we have taken is to receive written comments in response to public notification of an application. So With that in mind, the Development Procedures Bylaw currently requires that we send out mailed notification letters to any adjacent property owners and residents when we do receive these types of applications. We would also be posting any proposal information on the RDOS website and our Facebook page. We do print newspaper and internet news media website advertisements, and we require the posting of a notice of development sign. And lastly, the Advisory Planning Commission is involved in that process to consider these types of applications as well. And it should be noted that these requirements apply to both initial licensing applications as well as any application to relocate an existing license to another location. So after 4 years of working through these types of referrals, we have noticed just a couple of issues, the first of which being that the notification methods seem to be quite excessive. And secondly, as I mentioned in the last slide, that these notification requirements also apply to applications to relocate an existing license to another location. And this really came to light last year when we received a referral within Okanagan Falls to relocate an existing license to a new store that was only just about 150 meters from its original location. And they had to go through the same steps that would have which they normally had gone through when they had originally applied. So it was quite an onerous process for the property owner in that case, or the business owner. So with that in mind, we have identified several opportunities to streamline the referral process, and particularly as it relates to the notification of these applications. We could be focusing our initial notification on adjacent property owners and residents. So just the way that we've been doing it with sending out letters, that seemed to be an appropriate way to notify these applications. We could be eliminating newspaper notification requirements similar to the way that we have been, that we had eliminated that for other application types. We could eliminate the notice of development sign requirement. And lastly, we could leave the decision to send these referrals to the advisory planning commissions to the board. So instead of having that built into the process every single time, just have that decision be left to the board there. And similar to development variance permits and temporary use permit applications, local governments do have the ability to delegate to staff the authority to issue recommendations to the Liquor and Cannabis Branch for cannabis license applications. So an opportunity that we have is to delegate the authority to issue these recommendations specifically for applications which propose to relocate an existing store to another location within a community, and also to issue recommendations with respect to applications that involve lands that are currently zoned to allow retail as a permitted use. So then just in conclusion, our administrative recommendation then is to, for electoral area D, maintain the current policy of permitting retail cannabis in any zone where retail is a permitted use, and also to amend the development procedures bylaw so that we're kind of limiting that to only including notification requirements for sending out letters to adjacent residents and property owners, posting of the proposal information on our website, and notification through our mass notification system, and that's a Voyant Alert there, and then leaving APC consideration up to the board for the board's discretion there. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. DeYoung. Are there any questions for Ms. DeYoung? And I can't see the board right at this moment, so.
There's a hand from Director Gilbert.
Go ahead, Director.
Perfect.
Gilbert.
Yeah, just one question. Is this does the RDOS require this same procedure to happen to any liquor stores that pop up in the areas, or let's say wineries as well?
Short answer is no. We do perform a quick zone check on winery applications just to make sure they're consistent with the zoning bylaw, but it's not the same process as what cannabis stores have to go through.
Thank you. Any
Sure.
other questions for Ms. DeYoung?
There's a follow, Director Gilbert.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just to kind of get some background, this the reason why cannabis stores are specifically targeted for something like this, and the liquor stores are not targeted for something like that if they're retail in the RDOS.
Well, we're bound by provincial legislation in this respect, and so the province requires that a local government support an application for a cannabis retail store, and that support has to be based on consultation undertaken with the community. So, I mean, we put together processes based on what we were anticipating in relation to community interest in these stores, which is the list that Mr. Wong outlined in terms of all the consultation steps that we have. But now that we've got some experience with them and have seen how they've operated and the level of interest from the community, we think there's some streamlining that can happen with our own procedures. We still have to get the board's support, and that support still has to be based on consultation, but we think the consultation can be a little more focused maybe.
Also a hand from Director Taylor.
Director Taylor, please.
Thanks, and sorry the cameras seem to be masking me to the chair. So I'm the area affected, Area D, and I suspect we brought this to the board. I acknowledge that a lot of things have happened. People's norms have changed. I think excellent question from Director Gilbert. I don't have a problem with treating them as retail businesses and agree that they shouldn't be targeted any differently than liquor. All of that said, I think if there is going to be a notification process, so I don't really have a problem with the first motion, but the second motion, from my perspective, is more problematic because I look at the people in my community and a lot of them aren't on internet. They certainly don't follow the RDOS website page or Facebook page. And probably the most realistic way of notifying people is the board. That's what, in my own unstatistical, informal survey and questioning of people is what actually gets their attention and makes them aware. So if we are trying to notify the public, that is one that we perhaps wouldn't want to get rid of. I do speak in support of trying to recognize that the market will probably determine this, and things have moved along a long way from 4 or 5 years ago. I'd just like to keep in mind what is the best way of notifying a broad public with many different stratas of familiarity with internet, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Taylor. Were you looking to make a motion there?
Not yet. I'd like to, hear
Thank
if
you.
there's other comments from the table.
Very good. Director Gettens, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm trying to recall the conversation that we had about the last application that we had for a cannabis store in Area D, and I thought where we were kind of getting to the rub of the situation is that we have companies that are doing the process correctly. So, and I think that if I remember correctly, it was an out-of-province company, came in, followed the process, followed our procedures, invested in the town, bought a property, and then it came to us at the board to see if we could agree to then let them put their store into it. Whereas if it wasn't a cannabis store and they wanted to open a different store, this board wouldn't have input on whether they're going to do that, whether we're going to be allowed to open that store or not. And I thought the problem is that we were, as a board, influencing, the right to earn a living and that kind of thing and invest in a community. And so people are putting in a lot of money. We come to the board and then we could say no. And I thought that's why we're looking for some direction on this, is whether we could really, if a company's following all the legalities and the rules and doing everything correctly, how can we as a board say no because people in the community don't want that type of business? I thought that was the rub that we were trying to address with bringing this forward. And just to give some certainty to companies who are investing in our industrial areas in the regional, or the retail areas in the regional district. Am I remembering that correctly?
Thank you, Director Gettens. Mr. Garish, would you be able to refresh our memory, or is that better to CEO Newell?
Well, I can start, but based on conversations with the then area director, my understanding was there's just a concern over the number of cannabis retail stores being proposed for OK Falls, and a desire to potentially put in regulations that might restrict the numbers or how close they could be to each other. We hadn't had an opportunity to flesh it out, but just something to deal with the overall number of applications for these types of stores in the community.
Thank you. A follow-up, Director Gettens?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So keeping the status quo doesn't address that then. So if the community doesn't want, 3 or 4 or 12 cannabis stores, then this won't really address the struggle that businesses are having if they want to invest in OK Falls and happen to bring a business that the community doesn't want to have in that community. So to me, I mean, like I'll follow the lead of the director because you're much more in touch, of course, with your constituents. But I just don't see this addressing the concern we had at the last application for this type of business in OK Falls. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Gettens. Are there any other questions for the panel?
Director Barkwell and Director Monteith have hands up.
Director Barkwell, please.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly agree with all the things that Director Taylor said about the society's changing and notification is important. But the question I want to bring up just for thought maybe is one of the items of ways of notification was the voyant alert. And I have to wonder about sending out the notifications about zoning changes on voyant alert and notification fatigue. I kind of thought that that was for, emergency situations and such where you need to, get some sort of really notification to people immediately. I don't know what people think and how that's supposed to be used, but that question comes to my mind.
Thank you. Mr. Garish, please.
I'll take that, Mr. Chair. So you can choose on Voyant. If you want just emergency notifications, you can choose just emergency notifications. If you want to get planning changes, you can apply for that. Or if you're on a water system and you want notification on a water system failure, you can get that. But it's up to the individual registering to choose.
Thank you, Mr. Newell. Director Monteith, please.
And to the chair, so Director Gettens does recall the conversation correctly that we did have with the last application. Also, to add to that, the feedback we did get at that time from the residents was that there was concerns about the proximity of cannabis stores to school, to the beach, so those sort of things. So the director at the time was trying to find that happy medium spot. Oakdale Falls, we got 3 liquor stores? Like, how much is too much? And I agree that it is a free market, letting the market play itself out, strongest survive. But in the meanwhile, I guess the concern to the public or to the residents was how many is too many? Is there a way to limit them so that we're not getting 12 cannabis stores and no food stores? So there was a healthy conversation around that, and there was feedback from the community. So just want to share.
Thank you, Director Monteith. Any other questions from the panel? Director Coyne, Jr., please.
Yeah, I think we're kind of straying off topic here. The question is, how are we going to notify, not the philosophical, around whether or not we're going to have too many or not. That's going to be decided by the province and by the marketplace. It shouldn't be decided by us, because then how many food suppliers you're going to have, and how many clothing stores you're going to have, and all the rest of it. Like that's not what we should be talking about right now. The question on the table is, or proposed, is how are we going to notify residents? And there's a recommended motion there that we do written and on our website. And if there's anything other than that, then that's what we should be discussing as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Director Coyne. Are you looking to make that motion?
No, I'll leave that for Director Taylor. It's his area, but I think that's the question that we're talking about here, not whether or not we have too many or not enough.
Thank you, sir. Director Gettens, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just for my own understanding then, do we do the same process if somebody wanted to open a clothing retail store in OK Falls? Because I think what the concern is, if we are notifying and everybody has to come to the board in order to invest in their retail business in OK Falls, but we're treating one industry differently than the other one, I think the problem is that we could have these investors feel a little bit nervous about investing in the regional district because they can do all this work and get to the board, and then the board can say no, even though they're following the process. So I agree with what Director Coyne just said, that that's what's on the table, but I don't believe that's what's addressed, that we're not addressing the issue with this.
Thank you, Director Gettens. Director Bloomfield, is it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I fully appreciate the comments from the other directors about the free market and allowing the free market to do, to sort out how many stores we need and how many cannabis stores and where they should be. However, as has been pointed out to us, we do have to follow provincial guidelines for the approval of such stores, the same as we do with liquor stores. And I think that to avoid confusion in our policies, if the policy for approving a cannabis store aligned with the policy for approving a liquor outlet, then I think that that's the safest place to be. I think if we have different policies for different types of stores that need approval from the province, then I think that just leads to confusion, and so that's just my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bloomfield. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none,
Director Taylor had a
Yeah,
hand up.
Sorry, Director.
To staff. What are the posting requirements for liquor stores? And I guess before going there, I would just say, like, my reason for being content for now with the first motion was just that I think it is a complex issue, and I was prepared to just leave it as is for now, okay? Because I appreciate that, well, right now we've only got one store. So it's not as big an issue as it was before, all right? So maybe time will resolve it. But the reality is we've got an elementary school 200 yards from this outlet, and some of the municipalities sitting around this table have restrictions on where elementary schools can be positioned relative to a cannabis store. And I'm not sure that we want to move down that road first, okay? Maybe we'd like to see other people do that first. So that's why I was content to leave the first motion as is and just make sure we have strong notification, but I accept that it should be the same as for retail, for liquor.
Thank you. I've got a really fun picture of the board there.
Director Holmes has his hand up.
Very good. Director Holmes, please.
So in Summerland, our retail space is basically limited to downtown, and it just happens to be all the schools are also downtown. And so we don't really have any choice but to put cannabis stores within, close proximity schools. And when we first went down the road, the school board opposed what we were doing quite strongly. But since then, I don't know how many years it's been now, but since then, the school board doesn't have an issue. They realize that the cannabis stores have done a really good job of making sure only people of age enter those stores, and it hasn't been an issue. The proximity school has not been an issue at all, and the school board's the first to admit that now. So I don't think that should be it's a non-issue as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Director Holmes. Again, I'm having trouble seeing all of the board.
Director Gilbert has his hand up.
Okay, Director Gilbert, please.
Thank you through the chair. And I guess this is a question for staff. I'm just like, is it that it's required by the province that when a cannabis store comes into a community that they have to notify the residents, or is that just a requirement from RDOS?
Mr. Garrish, please.
Thank you. Through the chair. So my understanding is that the legislation sets out that an application for a cannabis retail store can't be considered by the provincial approving officer unless it's supported by resolution supporting it from the local government. And any local government putting forward a supporting resolution has to demonstrate how it came to that resolution through public consultation. How that public consultation is undertaken is up to the discretion of the local government. So we have our 5 steps, but based on experience, we think some of that can be streamlined.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none.
Oh, Director Taylor has a hand up. I think he wants to make a motion.
Yeah.
My apologies. Director Taylor, please.
I'd make the administrative motion on the first case, but I
Seconder,
would speak
please.
against the second one.
Seconder, Director Gettens. Are there any further questions on the first motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Again, I can't fully see the board. Director Penticton? None against?
No opposition.
Motion carries. Director Taylor, do you care to speak to the second motion?
I wouldn't make this motion, but I would make an alternate. So
Go ahead.
being a rookie, am I allowed to do that at this point?
You can make whatever motion you want.
Just putting that looser. I would move that the RD's bylaw be amended to require notification comparable to what's done for liquor stores. And if you want to delegate the authority for relocation, I'd be okay with that too.
Thank you, sir. Any seconder? Seconder, Director Gettens. Any discussion?
Director Bush has his hand up.
Director Bush, please.
Yeah, so does that align with what the provincial government wants?
Mr. Garish, please.
He's looking unsure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm madly racing through my mind here trying to recall, and I'm getting confused because I know in the past we have helped, say for instance, the town of Oliver, and I know in relation to the work we've done for the town, we've assisted on liquor license applications, and so I'm familiar with what the town does for consultation, but I can't recall at the top of my head what our processes are, so I have to go back and research that, and I'll have to see what our processes for liquor stores are relate to what the province requires for cannabis consultation.
Would it be, and I'm sorry for interjecting here, but would it be acceptable to Director Taylor to amend his motion to whatever the province requires for notification, please?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't like Russian staff. So staff would like us to table this.
I've lost audio on Director Taylor there.
Sorry, I don't like rushing staff. So if staff would appreciate some time to come back to this. The whole exercise was to avoid work by staff, unnecessary time and effort. I don't want to get us into a deeper hole. So if you want to come back next month.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Noel, please.
Or do you want to just charge on?
So we have a motion on the floor, Mr. Chair, and my understanding is that we want to table this until we get more information. So somebody would move a motion to defer.
Moved and seconded.
Very good. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question to defer. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. That concludes the business for the Planning and Development Committee. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Back to Chair Pendergraft. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Knodel. Protective Services meeting is canceled for today. The ambulance folks couldn't make it or aren't making it. We'll reschedule that. So that brings us to Environment and Infrastructure meeting or committee meeting. And I'll go to Director Gettens to chair that one. Go ahead, please.
Great, thanks, Chair. I'll call the meeting to order. It's about 9:30 something. Sorry, I can't find a clock. Just can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Great, thanks so much. First item on the agenda is Wild Safe BC program summary. So I will just refer this over to the CAO, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So we have a number of environmental related programs that we run, and we have Ms. Fiorito and Ms. Bloomfield at the table, and they're going to give us their 2022 reports on the Wild Safe program and the mosquito control program, and then respond to any questions that committee may have. So we'll turn it over to them, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shelley Fiorito, and I'm the community coordinator for the RDOS Wild Safe BC program. Oh, there we go. So just a quick overview of the program itself. So the Wild Safe BC program is a provincial-wide education and human-wildlife conflict reduction program. It was formerly known as the Bear Aware program, so it's commonly referred to as that, but it's updated to the Wild Safe program now. And we also work with the Wildlife Alert Reporting Program, which is an interactive mapping program that the public can access. And if you can see on the image there, you can do queries and filters on different wildlife species and interactions that have been reported to the CO service. So it's mapped on there. You can look at your community, you can zoom in and out and have a look at what kind of activity there's been in your community. Some of the activities that we participated in this year was providing some youth education. We attended some community events. We do garbage audits through communities the night before garbage day, just to make sure that people are complying with our bylaws and not putting garbage out too early, which is an attractant for wildlife and causes concerns in the community. We provide bear spray training or safe deployment training for community members and staff at the RDOS here. We have done some community engagement, and then we also support the Bear Smart certification program. So just to go into a few more details, the youth education portion of the program is providing classroom and outdoor activities for mainly elementary school kids to identify signs of wildlife, how to avoid conflict, and what to do if they see wildlife. And I did set up the table behind me here with some of our educational materials for you guys to have a look at. I'll leave those here until lunchtime so you can come and have a poke through and look at some of the materials that we use to teach kids. We do focus strongly on black bears just because it's a very common interaction in the community. Lots of kids, just the way that our communities are set up, there's usually some sort of corridor that comes through there. So black bears are very common in the region. So in 2022, there was 11 presentations and I worked with over 200 kids to talk about wildlife in the community. Oh, sorry. The community events that I attended ranged from setting up information booths, doing safety presentations, and we've also done some site assessments for safety concerns. So I attended the Penticton Home Show. We had the Similkameen Recreation Open House out in Karamias. Went down to Anarchist Mountain to provide some training down at the wildlife group at the fire station down there. Been up to Summerland to the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Research Station out in Headley, Heritage Hills, Naramata, and West Bench. So we've reached over several hundred residents at these multiple events over the year. So as far as the garbage audits are concerned, they're a great way to remind residents of their responsibility to maintain attractants on their property. So we go through, and the night before garbage collection, we will put a sticker like the yellow sample there for garbage cans that have been put out before the deadline on garbage day, and just follow up with a letter for residents explaining what our bylaws are, what the restrictions are, why it's a concern, and request that they no longer put their garbage out too early, and then provide some information on safety for wildlife in the area. So I went out 7 times in 2022, and we had a really great success with it. There were very few non-compliant properties in any of the areas that I attended. And people are super understanding when you run into them. Had a couple of interactions cruising around while I was doing the audits. And a lot of residents are just not aware that the bylaws are in place and that there are restrictions on those types of things. So it's always good to have that kind of conversation with residents face to face. And I've also worked with City of Penticton and the District of Summerland on bylaw and providing templates for letters to send out following audits. For bear spray training, hands-on training is available for community groups, organizations, and staff at the RDOS. So what we do is an interactive session. We sit down and we do some discussion about safety features, when it's appropriate to use it, how to dispose of it safely, how to travel safely with it, and then we follow that up with a hands-on deployment in a safe outdoor space for people to have an opportunity to practice before they get into that situation where it's required. So within the 3 training events, we worked with 85 people this year. Community engagement. So this was more the media stuff. I'm fairly new to this program, so I've kind of shied away from the news media portion of it. So I'm hoping that this year we can, now that I've got a strong handle on everything, I think we can maybe get a little more news media activity. It's one of the most effective ways, I think, and covers a broad spectrum of community members to get that information out there. And then we're going to work with that wildlife alert reporting program as well to make sure people know how to use it and what its purpose is. So I know Bear Smart certification, we have one community in our regional district that has achieved the Bear Smart certification, and that is Naramata. And Naramata is only one of 10 communities in the province that has been able to achieve that certification. It's a provincial initiative that works with the community members to engage in a collective effort to reduce the conflict, make sure that there's a plan in place to minimize the number of bears that are being shot and killed in the communities due to safety concerns. So that was kind of the guideline behind it. WildSafe BC provides the support in form of consistent education provided within the community to support that certification. So some of the challenges in 2022, we did have an exceptionally high black bear conflict level this year across the region. Multiple communities did have active bears within their communities, causing all kinds of trouble. There was the full range of scenarios. There was family units, there was juveniles, there was single males causing conflict. So I think the biggest struggle was to try and address each of those as quickly as possible. And touching back on the fact that a lot of the new residents that have moved into the Okanagan are just unaware of the level of wildlife activity and the potential for conflict within our communities. We've also had a much broader range of species in conflict with residents. So we're having a lot of conversations about bobcat, we're talking moose, we're talking elk, badgers, not necessarily common species that we've dealt with in the past, but they seem to be moving into the area and people are concerned. So those have been interesting conversations. And then I think one of the biggest challenges for us was just encouraging residents to call and report conflict in those high-risk areas. So calling that RAP line number and notifying the Conservation Office Service. And the notifications that are provided to the CO service through that RAP line is the data that we use in the WARP program. It's transferred over into the WARP program and populates that interactive map. So it's important to know that there's that link with the information. So some of the successes that we've had is that we've added to our educational collection. So we've got a new black bear pelt. We have white-tailed deer and black bear skulls, and we have some wild replica tracks and scat for common species in the area that have been a big hit with the students. I did notice when I first started doing the classroom presentations that a lot of kids we've been very busy in the past with the classroom presentations, and a lot of kids have kind of moved through preschool, lower level elementary to higher level elementary, and they've had the same programming for years now. So they're very well versed in our programming. So we've updated some of those activities and presentations just to freshen things up and kind of give them a different perspective, and keeps it fun for the kids. We've been working on relationship building with local media. We're working with First Nations groups, federal organizations, and the municipalities. And I think one of the biggest things that I'm really pleased with is that we're continuing to work with the Inalkit Center. They had, back in 2019, started a series of First Nations perspective wildlife brochures. So we've got the Chief Black Bear brochure. We've completed, and the rattlesnake brochure is ready to go to print. Coyote's almost complete. So by the end of this year, we should have all 4 in this series completed. And it's always a big hit at presentations and events to see the First Nations perspective on that. So for 2023, to continue successfully engaging with the community, our program is hiring a summer student to supplement some of the activities. So they'll be participating in the community events like farmers markets, doing some school presentations and activities with youth, and then doing some of the garbage audits as well. And then we have set a priority on finding a source for the bear-resistant garbage cans. I know that that's something that a lot of residents have requested, and we've sourced those previously, and the manufacturer that we had no longer provides that style of garbage cans. So we're busy trying to find a new source for that to see if we can accommodate some residents with the bear-resistant garbage cans, and then complete our silk brochures. So that is all I have for the Wild Safe program. Questions?
Great, thanks, Shelley. Just once the presentation comes down, I'll be able to see the board a little bit better. But in the meantime, I can't see any hands right now. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I can see everybody now. Are there any questions for Shelley? Yeah, go ahead, Director Roberts, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Really well done. I see that you've touched some of the questions I had. I'm happy to see that you were at the library in Headley. Headley and Area G, I get a lot of phone calls, and this last year specifically, a lot in regards to the concerns with the destruction of bears because of the interface. There is a concern and a desire, and I've kind of put it out there a little bit whether or not there was somebody who wanted to take up looking at the community as bear smart. And then at the same time, it was nice to see that you were connecting with First Nations, because again, that's a community that's very integrated. It is one community. The Upper Similkameen Indian Band and the basically has most of the young children and the younger families. And so it's very much one community, but it's important to have that work with the First Nations. And I was wondering if there are steps in that particular direction, because it is basically uniquely situated that it is, like you stated, a real main corridor. And so there's a lot of, this last year, cougar, bobcat, and of course, a lot of black bear, which it usually has. So I'm hoping to see some more work done there, and then some in the community of Olalla.
Okay, thanks, Director Roberts. Shelley, is there any comment on that?
I can definitely provide. If you contact me, I can definitely provide. I know I've been out there and done some discussions with the Upper Similkameen Indian Band. We did go through and do an audit out there. The tricky part is that if it's, because it's not truck lifted garbage cans, the weight restriction for the garbage guys to pick up the bins, the reinforced wild safe or or wildlife resistant garbage cans are heavier because they're reinforced, and they've got metal components that lock the garbage cans so that when it's gravity lifted, it pops open. So that was a discussion that we did have. I know that they were looking at trying to provide those garbage cans for the community, and we struggled to source that. So it is a priority for us, and we'll continue to discuss and present as much as the community is interested in having, for sure.
Thanks, Shelley. Go ahead, Director Roberts.
And thank you for that. And just to follow up, it's just, and I saw that, of course, that you came out to present at the Similkameen Recreation Center there. And of course, we have a lot of stuff going on with that trailer going to Headley. And I'm just thinking that that might be a really good marrying up of two different programs that you're with the recreation. Headley, you'd have the youth available, and at the same time putting up a presentation would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Director Roberts. Piggybacking on existing opportunities to share collective and joint messages is a good idea. Any other questions from the board? I have a quick question for you then. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Director Holmes. Oh, and then I'll see Director Taylor next.
Thank you. Does the Naramata Bear Smart plan, is it an actual document that outlines what's being done there?
Oh, go ahead, Shelley.
Thank you, sorry. The certification process or the Bear Smart program itself is something that's run through the province. So they have a list of requirements to achieve that certification. You get a 5-year certificate. I don't know if there's an actual document that says that you've achieved it or what that piece of paper looks like physically. I think Naramata is coming close to the end of their second 5-year term for Bear Smart. But there is a list of studies and a plan that needs to be laid out before you achieve that. So it is a multi-year process. It's not something that falls under the WildSafe programming. WildSafe provides the educational component that is required with that certification process. So I can provide the ongoing education for the community, but the certification process and the studies and all of those things that need to occur is outside of the WildSafe program.
Okay.
Thanks,
Just to
Shelley.
follow up. Can I follow up? I'm just wondering, when you talk about the plan, the Bear Smart plan, what is that plan? What is that plan? What does it actually look like? Usually when I think of a plan, it's a document and that's something that you can follow. So.
Shelley?
So there is a list of, there's a community study that needs to be done on the wildlife activity in the community. An assessment is done. Once that assessment is complete, there is a follow-up assessment that needs to be done that addresses or highlights the security and safety concerns within the community and what areas could be improved to reduce the risk of wildlife conflict in the community. Some of the things that they do look at are like having the bylaws for garbage collection, having a secure site for garbage or for landfills, having secure garbage bins in parks. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that residents have to have those wildlife resistant garbage cans, but there should be some descriptive bylaw in place that explains the safest way to do that. So there's multiple things that need to occur.
Right. One more follow-up, if I may. So
Yeah,
all
go
of
for
that, all of that should be in a document somewhere, presumably. And if so, could I get a copy?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's available online. I can either send you the list of actions that need to occur for each step of the process before you achieve the certification, for sure.
Great. Thanks, Shelley. Director Taylor, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, if you're looking to advertise, I think the SCAHA Matters and Apex Matters are a useful, effective tool that people generally read cover to cover, and have other opportunities for electronic distribution as well. Outside scope, I'm sure, but can you advise as to, or can you refer people to where they go with carcass remains? Because that's probably more, we have as many dead deer carcass issues as the one bear family that we have but never see.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Shelley.
As it gets a little complicated because I think it depends on where the carcass is located. If it's on private land, it's up to the private homeowner to make arrangements to have that disposed of. If it's on roadside, I believe it's Modi that is supposed to handle that. Yeah.
Thanks, Shelley. I'm just taking another quick look here. I don't see any other hands up for questions. Just shout out if I'm incorrect. I have a quick question then, Shelley. First, so thank you for the presentation. It's definitely been a hot topic in West Bench for sure. And I think you're spot on about people moving here not realizing I grew up in bear country in Alberta and thought we were getting out of that in the Okanagan. And so completely was incorrect for spring that I spent here. I do think that bear-proof garbage, like if we can figure that out this year, that would go such a long way because that's like the number one request that I get as well. And just really quickly with the bylaws. So can you just remind us, just since this is being recorded, like what is the bylaw? Like the earliest that you could put out your garbage is the day of at a certain time. And what is the fine if you don't follow our bylaw? Or am I putting you on the spot? Sorry.
Sorry, I thought I had some sitting on the back table here. Our bylaw states 5 a.m. the day of garbage collection. I don't know offhand what the municipalities might be. I think Penticton is it 7 a.m. maybe?
Okay.
It is. So similar. We don't have, there's not a fine per se. The process with the garbage audits, the way that we work it is I will go out, do the garbage audit, put the stickers on, send a letter to the resident requesting that they follow the bylaw, give them a copy of the bylaw, give them options. I mean, there's storage containers that can be used that secure it a little bit better. There's nothing foolproof. That's going to 100% guarantee, even with the bear-resistant garbage cans. It's not infallible. They're still going to get in there. It's going to take them a little bit longer, which is frustrating for residents, I'm sure. Yeah, but there isn't fines in place. So once that letter's been sent out, we'll usually wait a couple of weeks and then do a follow-up audit within the community just to see if people are still leaving their garbage out. We don't target specific properties. We do the community as a whole.
Okay.
If they receive a second letter, they are added to a list, and it can escalate to the point where the CO service is involved, and that's where the fines would come into place.
Okay,
so
that's
that after a third strike situation.
Okay, thanks for that, Shelley. If I don't see any other questions, then I might just refer over to the CAO for our next item on the agenda, which is about the mosquito control program. So CAO?
Yeah, back to Ms. Fiorito on this one, Madam Chair. This is our 2022 report on the mosquito control program.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Ms. Fiorito. I said that wrong, sorry.
No problem. So before I get started on the presentation, I was just going to send around, I've just got a little vial, a sample that was taken in September that has a really great, it actually has all 4 stages of mosquito larvae in here, which is what we target with our program. And then we've also just got a container with a sample of the pesticide that we use, just so that everybody can have a look at it. Alrighty, so our mosquito program has been running since the 70s, I believe. So we're well established as a program. This year we had an exceptionally busy season. Our monitoring began late February, which is the earliest we've ever started. And immediately our larvae samples were exceeding 100 per dip. So just to put that in perspective, when we're talking about dip numbers, our threshold is when we take a sample, we take a 1 cup dip out of a pond. And if there's any more than 3 in the dip, which is the white cup on the image here, anything more than 3 in that cup would be treatable levels. So you can see already that there's several hundred samples in that 1 dip. So we were treating by mid-March, again, earliest we've ever done. And then, I mean, you guys will be able to have a look, but this is what we're targeting when we're treating for pest or treating for larvae. So they squiggle around and just continue to grow in size and eventually fly off. So on the similkameen side, the system is an uncontrolled river system. So it does dramatically fluctuate very quickly during rain events and during freshet. This year, the similkameen rose and fell with the initial snow melt, and then again in the late season, once the temperatures warmed and the rainfall started in late May into early July. Typical of the similkameen River, the rapid change in water levels saw the flow rates increase from 103% on June 3rd to 150% of normal flow rate. So that was an increase of almost 50% in 6 days, or in 3 days, sorry. So with that extreme lift in levels, you can see the water pushing up through the soil and lifting into the surface, creating a whole bunch of flooding. On the Okanagan side, it's a little bit different. The river system is dammed all along, so it's a controlled system. This year in June, Okanagan Lake had reached full pool, and then the prolonged precipitation and the late snowpack melt brought the levels up to the maximum was 15 centimeters over full pool, and that occurred late June. And it took a few weeks for it to return back to full pool levels. And by the time the water moved its way down the Okanagan system, we had some pretty severe flooding in the Oliver area. And that was sustained for weeks and weeks through that area. So we employ several different methods of treatment. We do hand application. The staff use backpack blowers to distribute the pesticide. And they also, we have a helicopter company on contract that provides helicopter services to us so that we can treat large areas very quickly. This year was an exceptional year for the amount of flights that we had. We've never flown this many flights in a season. Last year was a very quiet season. We only had the 3 flights on the similkameen side, and this year we did 9 flights and probably could have done 1 or 2 more, but we ran out of time with the pilot. Some of the challenges that the program faced this year, along with I think everyone else, was the flooding. A lot of our sites were either washed away, access points disappeared, and then just the level of debris that was everywhere certainly changed how we access the area. So again, this is on the Okanagan side. I guess the bottom picture is in Olalla, and that top picture is in Oliver. So there was some sustained flooding in areas, and what that does is just saturates the soil and allows any of the eggs that have been sitting in the soil that can survive for up to 15 years are now wetted and able to produce active mosquito populations. So we had an exceptional year, and that wasn't just in the Okanagan, that was all the way across BC this year. Some of the safety concerns that we had, and this is consistent for mosquito control crew. Their job is difficult, and I think that's an under description of the challenges that they have to work with. The staff that we have are outstanding in their jobs. They are a special breed, I think, for mosquito control. they are dealing with a lot. They deal with a lot of wildlife. They deal with aggressive livestock. There's hidden low spots in areas. There's soft soil like quicksand, just based on construction on properties and regrading and all of that creates a huge challenge for our staff. They spend a lot of time in hip waders. So the concern with all of these hidden low spots is that if they drop and their hip waders fill with water, there's issues there, safety concerns. We've got Cindy there pointing out the rose bushes. So we've got thorny, really difficult areas to access. And then all the creepy crawlies that go along with it as well. We found also, and I think this kind of comes back to that same idea of new residents that are just not aware and don't recognize that there's the issues that are being created. So we get new property owners that aren't aware that we do mosquito control, and our staff need access to different areas of the property. The program is run on request. So if you want mosquito control service, you can either talk to one of our staff or phone the hotline or let me know, and we're happy to provide that service. Sort of in exchange, so the expectation, I guess, is that we are able to safely access your property. They strive to be quietly in and out without you recognizing that they've been there. So having locked gates, putting up fresh fencing, and having uncared for or like rewilded space makes it really difficult for our staff to get through. This year was exceptional for vegetation growth. I think they were walking through 11-foot high grass at one point out in the Similkameen side. So you can imagine if you've got a backpack blower on, that's 50 pounds worth of pesticide on your back, and you're trying to fight your way through 8 or 10 or 11-foot tall grass. You can't see where you're going. You don't know what's forward the next step. And they did come face to face with a couple of bears doing that. So bears are surprisingly agile and quiet when walking through grass. So that was a new one for them. So, I mean, there is definite risk involved in this position. Some of the misconceptions that have popped up regularly in discussions with the public are that mosquito control affects the bat and bird species by removing that food source. And I think it makes sense to calculate it out this way, just to show what volume of mosquitoes would need to be consumed to be equivalent to what an actual meal would be. So we looked at the Townsend big-eared bat that consumes on average 20 to 25 moths for each meal. As far as mass is concerned, 1,200 mosquitoes would equal one of those moths. So for them to complete a meal, they need to eat 27,000 mosquitoes for each meal. So it's not us reducing the mosquito population isn't interfering with bat species, because they're going to spend their time on a larger meal than fighting with skinny, gangly mosquitoes. There's no value in it. We should also note that mosquito control, and I think people are concerned with either fish species or other things like that for our pest management plan and the requirements that we have with the province. We cannot and do not treat on fish-bearing water bodies. We don't treat in flowing waters. So we don't throw pesticide into the rivers. We don't treat the lake. We can treat stagnant water. We can treat flood water that may move around the property, but it's always a contained water body. So we don't interfere with fish species in that way. And our pesticide is actually targeted. The bacteria that is in the pesticide, it's a targeted bacteria that interferes with the gut flora in the Diptera species, which is mosquitoes and biting black flies. So it is very highly targeted to only those biting flying bugs. it's often stated that, or requested that we can you spray our property for mosquitoes? And we did want to make it clear that we don't actually use any sprays or fogs in our program. We only use the pellet BTI. Sprays and fogs are used to treat the adult flying mosquitoes. So that's adulticiding, and that is usually a much higher toxicity. It is a lot more concerning. We need to have really stringent safety measures for our staff using that kind of material. So we have chosen to use only BTI, which is the pellets that were sent around. It's a corn byproduct. The bacteria, or the corn product, is soaked in the bacteria, and then it's coated in a food grade soluble wax just to contain it for travel or for transport, so that when it hits the water, the wax dissolves and the bacteria is released. So when the mosquitoes are in the water and they ingest, it's ingested, it is activated in the guts of those target species, and creates a toxic environment in their stomachs. So we do not fog and we don't spray. Some of the other misconceptions: eradicating mosquito populations is just not a possible scenario. We would need warehouses and warehouses and warehouses of pesticide to do that. The goal with our program is to maintain a tolerable level, a safe level, so that there isn't a risk of disease. There is West Nile. I think there was an outbreak previously, maybe 2011, I think it was, a small outbreak in the area. That does change things when there are disease outbreaks, but for the time being, if we can maintain reasonable levels with mosquitoes, it makes it pleasant for everyone to spend time outdoors. Climate change. So I think we've had not only expanded our habitats, our season has extended. We started earlier and finished later. And the sample that I sent around was actually taken late September. And we had already finished the program at that point. We had no access to the helicopter. So we closed out our season with those sort of levels in water bodies in the region. So we're expecting a active season this year as well. So again, to our team that we have, we've got 2 applicators that we use. One works the Okanagan side. Cindy, she's worked with us for 8 years, so she'll be back for her 9th season this year. And we took Jack on last year, and he will be back again this year. And then we also took advantage of one of the landfill staff, the temporary scale attendants. Genevieve helped us out as well to help us keep up late season. So that is all I have.
Excellent. Once that presentation comes down, then I'll be able to see the board again. But really quickly, what is the hotline number that citizens should be calling? And then I'll go to you, Director Bush. Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I don't have it on hand. I know that it's 4142, but I don't know if it's 490 or 492.
Okay. We can look it up. Go ahead, Director Bush. Oh, worries.
Yeah, so how do you address the concerns of people who do phone in? I mean, a lot of the local, they know we're going to have mosquitoes. We live with them, but, because every year is different. Can't control them all. But the new people, they move in and they see 1 or 2 mosquitoes and they're panicking. So how do you address that? Like, you can't go to each call, can you? Or you must know where it's bad and where it isn't bad? Or how do you address that?
Go ahead, Shelley.
So the way our program works is at the beginning of each season, so within the next couple of weeks, we'll be sending out a letter to all the locations that we treated last year. Every address that we attended, we'll get a letter saying we're getting ready to start our mosquito control season. are you still interested in having that service? So hopefully any new residents that, or any new purchasers, if the property's changed hands, will receive that letter. We try and make sure that we have a couple of, we printed some images of mosquitoes to stick on the front of the envelopes last year, just to make sure that people recognized that they were getting their mosquito letter. Our staff is really great. The techs are amazing with the public. So any people that are waving them down on the street, they can discuss that with them. They're exceptional at doing site assessments and wandering around and explaining all the different ways that people can mitigate the mosquito population and recognize where they may be coming from. We don't have a lot, like this year we picked up probably 24 new sites. And it's usually like a group of people that have decided they've had enough with the mosquitoes and you need to help us. So the techs will go out and kind of talk everybody through everything. So it's more word of mouth. If the neighbors, but it does have to be the landowner permission for us to access that property, if that answers the question.
Thanks, Shelley. You got a follow-up, Director?
Well, can I follow up?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Yeah, because the problem isn't with where the sites are being treated. The problem is with the people that live close to them, right? And I do know that, I mean, once you see mosquitoes, it's too late, right? We don't kill mosquitoes. No, it's just larvae. So it's a problem. And people panic when they see them, and there's really not much we can do about it by that time, but I guess carry on.
Thanks, Director. Director Holmes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So if we're continuously adding new sites, that presumably increases the cost of the program. That probably justifies why the cost of the program has been increasing over the years. And so I'm just wondering, is there any way we can be strategic about where we control, or is it just wherever it's needed you put it? And then if that's the case, you know, how do we keep this program from not running out of control in terms of costs?
Thanks, Director. Go ahead, Shelley.
I guess I didn't explain during the presentation. We are unique in that we run our mosquito control program in-house. Most other regional districts have hired a contractor to provide that service. So our program actually runs at almost 50% less cost-wise per year than the contracted services provide. So it's not really a matter of, it's a huge focus with us on maintaining efficiency, being cost-effective, and being productive. Our staff are outstanding in what they do. They put up with a whole heck of a lot during the season, just with the conditions and the different situations that they're put in. I can't say enough about them. It's not a job that I can do. I did a field review at one point this spring, and I'm not a mosquito tech at all. And they're really keen to improve their skills, make sure that we're using the best technology and the most efficient way to do that. So we've worked super, super hard on our program to make sure that it is very cost effective. And I think if you look at other regional districts, we are doing an outstanding job with the budget.
Thanks. Great. I'll just do a quick
May I
follow-up.
follow up?
And then yeah, for sure. But we're just out of time as well. So we'll do a quick follow-up and then we'll try and wrap it up after that. Go ahead, Director.
Okay. So I have no doubt about the quality or the efficiency of the staff. Yeah, doing a great job for sure. But the point is, like for any service, the more you do, the more it's going to cost. And when we're talking about mosquitoes, there's no limit on the number of mosquitoes. I mean, they're going to keep on coming, and we could keep treating, we can keep treating and keep treating, which but that's going to keep driving the costs up. And we have seen costs of the program increase because presumably because, as you said, 24 new sites last year. So, so it's great that we're improving the service, but I guess maybe this is a discussion for the board. At what point, how much is, or, do we want to spend on this? So, I don't know. Thanks.
Thanks, Director. Thanks, Director. Yeah, it might be a worthwhile conversation for sure about the approach and whether citizens direct the approach or if we have some kind of strategy behind it. But with that, just because we're out of time, I'm just going to double check and make sure there's no final burning questions. I don't see any. So thanks so much, Shelley and Lisa, for the presentation. There's always good facts in those presentations that are new and interesting. But with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting, please. Thank you. Seconded. Excellent. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Perfect. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gettens. Our regular board meeting is scheduled for 10:30, so we do have time for a few minutes to fill your coffees and stretch your legs, and then we'll get started at 10:30. Okay, if we could make our way back to our seats, we'll get started. A few more straggling in. We do have enough to get started though with. So good morning, everybody. I'll call to order the meeting of the Regional District Okanagan-Smilkameen. Looking at our agenda here, this is an opportunity to remove anything from the consent agenda if there's a desire to do so. Seeing no hands for anything there, looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us down to the consent agenda for corporate issues. Looking for a motion to adopt that. Moved, seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda development services. Looking for a motion to approve that. Moved, seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Perfect. Any opposed? That motion carries. That brings us down to B1 under development services, a proposed town of Osoyoos boundary expansion, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So back in February of 2022, the town of Osoyoos approached the Regional District about an annexation just outside their boundaries. And usually annexations occur when a property or properties or an area requires municipal services. So in this case, it was water, and the Regional District had no objections to the proposed annexation. And subsequently, the town has indicated they only intend to bring in 2 properties because the other 2 belong to a different irrigation district. So, and with the provincial process, they have to start again. So we're recommending that the regional district not object to the proposed annexation of 2 properties, Mr. Chair.
Okay, looking for a motion. Thank you. A seconder for that? Great. Any discussion on this? Seeing no hands, this one is a corporate vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B2, development variance in electoral area G, CAO.
Yeah, this is a variance to our subdivision bylaw. So this is where a property in electoral area G, Litticoat Road, wants to subdivide, but they don't have a well and haven't tested for water on the lot, one of the lots that they proposed for a home site severance. So that's a requirement of our subdivision bylaw, Mr. Chair, is that new properties have tested and have access to water quality and quantity. So we are recommending that this application be denied, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Roberts for direction on this.
Thank you. And after lots of discussion in regards to property owner, community, and staff, I'm planning on choosing the alternative. I do understand the correctness in policy, but I also understand the correctness in principle behind it. I think in regards to this particular severance, homestead severance in regards to this property and the individuals that live there and the well, that it would be appropriate to move forward with the alternate. Thank you. That'd be my motion.
Okay, so you're moving the alternative, which is to approve the variance. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded? Great. Any discussion? Not seeing any hands. This one is a rural vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us down to B3, a zoning bylaw amendment in electoral area A, CAO.
This is an application for a future subdivision, Mr. Chair, and it's right up in the Old Richter Pass Spotted Lake area. And the area is subject to environmentally sensitive development permits and watercourse development permits. And the reason it's coming is the minimum parcel size required for a lot up there is 2 hectares. This would be a 1 hectare. It's a 2 hectare parcel that would be subdivided into 2. So it doesn't meet our requirements, and we're very concerned about any development adjacent to Spotted Lake, which is a sacred site for First Nations.
Okay, thank you. This happens to be in my area, and I tend to agree with the staff recommendation. So if I could have someone make that motion for me, moved and seconded. It's the board policy when there is a motion to deny that we ask if the applicant or their agent wants to address the board. And I'm not sure if there's someone on. Okay, I do see probably Mr. Alenko. Can we check and have him put in? Can you hear us, Brad? Okay, Sam West is going to do the speaking. Sure. Is he? I see his name. Go ahead, Sam.
There, I think Brad was trying to. Brad could hear you, but he wasn't. You weren't able to hear him.
Okay.
I believe Brad was going to speak to this right before myself.
There we go.
So they want Brad. Yeah, go ahead.
There we go. A little bit of technical difficulty there. I couldn't get my my phone unmuted here. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members, for allowing me to make a brief presentation. I have read over the staff report, and I do have a few comments that I'd like to present to the board before the board proceeds with a vote on this. The rezoning application has been characterized as not being an infill development, and in fact, we do believe it is an infill, as the Kapula area is identified in the RGS as the Kapula Estate Settlement Area. So it's within a settlement area. We do believe it's an infill. The proposed rezoning and subdivision of the property is consistent with policy 1C4 of the RGS. That policy states limit consideration for rezoning of large rural land parcels to small parcel sizes outside of primary growth areas and rural growth areas only where such growth is infill, does not significantly increase the number of units or the established density, and respects the character of the surrounding. As the proposed development would be infill, it's not going to increase the established density, and it's consistent with the character of the Kapula Estates, because the frontages of the proposed lots are going to be very similar to the lots that are up there, a lot of the lots that are up there right now. And when I mentioned that the density won't increase, we have had some conversations with the owner to discuss some of the staff's concerns, and we feel that very possibly the resistance to the subdivision is equated to increasing in density, and we get that, we understand that. The zoning right now of all the properties in the Kapula Estates allows a single family dwelling, and it also allows an accessory dwelling. So every lot up there in the Kapula Estates is allowed to have 2 homes. The owner has agreed to put a covenant on the 2 lots that he's proposing to create. So he has one, he's just going to split it in half to create 1 additional lot. He's prepared to put a covenant on those lots to preclude the ability to construct the accessory dwelling. So that eliminates the concern, or any concern there might be for increasing density, because there won't be an increase in the potential number of lots based on the current zoning. A QEP is in the process of preparing an environmentally sensitive development permit submission and a watercourse DP. So those environmental matters are being dealt with, and any environmental values will be respected. There'll be no negative impact on the groundwater source, as the residential density will not exceed the density presently allowed. Again, if there's concerns about water, the current zoning allows each lot to contain a house and an accessory dwelling. So 2 dwellings on each lot. We're proposing that that density will not increase. So the impact on the ground source water simply won't be there above what is presently allowed in terms of density. There has been some thoughts and concern about Spotted Lake. This property is close to 750 meters away from Spotted Lake, and it is not adjacent to Spotted Lake. It's separated by probably half a dozen lots. So I don't think it's a reasonable characterization to suggest that the subdivision will have an impact on Spotted Lake or will disrespect the integrity of Spotted Lake. A public information meeting was held pertaining to this application, and there was only one person that expressed opposition. So we don't feel that there is a lot of opposition to this. And this area is actually in an area with an OCP designation that allows the subdivision. In fact, it says it encourages a range of lots between 0.2 hectares and 2 hectares. So the OCP is actually directing and allowing this to occur. That OCP is a little over a year old. It's a year and a half old only. I think there was a review done. And if the public and the regional district really didn't want the subdivision to occur or subdivisions to occur, the area certainly could have been designated a different land use designation. But the land use designation that's on there is completely consistent with the direction that the owners would like to go on this. So if the board's concern and Director Pendergraft's concern is that there's some public concern, I would certainly suggest I would suggest that we allow the application to at least go to a public hearing and have the public weigh into this, because I think that that's sort of primarily what the issue is. We've taken care of environmental and water course issues. Groundwater isn't an issue. Density isn't an issue. Character of the neighborhood really isn't an issue, because the lot widths are not going to be any narrower than some of the properties that are there, and the spacing of homes that will be there will be again similar to some of the homes that are there. So if it's a public perception or a public issue, then I'd suggest we send this off to a public hearing and have the public weigh into this. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair, if the board has any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll check with the board. Is there any questions on this? Director Bush, go ahead.
Yeah, so what's the ruling with the OBWB in subdivisions?
Subdivisions is a 1 hectare minimum lot size.
So that's still okay. Yeah. So I can't really see a problem with this being subdivided.
Okay. We'll get to that when it becomes part of the discussion. Questions any further for Director Roberts? Go ahead for question.
Thank you to the chair. Brad, when you talked about the auxiliary building, now is there a square footage allotment for an auxiliary building versus a new residential building?
Through the chair, yes, I believe there is. I believe it's 125 square meter is the maximum size of an accessory structure. So there is a maximum floor area size for accessory structures.
Okay. Any further questions? Don't think I'm seeing any hands on the screen either. So thank you, Mr. Alenko and Mr. West, for the presentation to the board. I'll go back to the board. We do have the motion on the floor at the moment to deny this application, and I will expand on my thoughts on it just a little bit. And the main reason I'm opposed to this is at the moment, the minimum lots in that specific community is 5 acres or 2 hectares. And it's been discussed previously whether there was a desire to go smaller, and it's never really been something that the community wanted. Allowing one to go through as a one-off, I don't see as the way to go and approach this. If we were going to go to smaller lot sizes up there, I think it requires a bigger community discussion, not just a public hearing, which, as we're all pretty much aware, doesn't usually get a good community turnout. So this isn't the way, in my opinion, to address an issue of potentially going to smaller lot sizes. And that is a big change from 2 hectares down to 1. It sounds kind of harmless, but it's a foot in the door. So that's where I stand on it. Any other discussion on this? Go ahead, Director Conans.
Thank you, Chair. I don't believe I even have a vote on this one, but I just wanted to say I think it is something that we could look at as in a broader discussion later, because I know we have, and we've all talked about, we have one of the most expensive places for land and homes in BC, if not Canada. So I think a discussion on lowering the criteria for someone to be able to live here, criteria meaning lowering the size of land, would probably be a really, really good discussion for all of us in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? I see a hand from Director Knodel, but I don't see Director Knodel any longer. But did you have your hand up? You're on mute there. Still can't hear you. Throwing his hands in the air. Okay. So there, we're hearing you now, Rick.
I'm kind of thinking that we're going to come under extreme pressure from the province in the near future to start densifying our small holdings. And I'm just wondering, you know, are we going to get out of step and get forced into this by the province down the road? I think Mr. Newell has a comment there from that point.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to, I was going to say Director Newell, but CAO Newell.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to assure the board that we will be having this discussion. We are currently in process on a review of the regional growth strategy, and the board's going to have to decide if they want growth to occur in our high-density areas or if you want sprawl. That's the discussion at the regional growth strategy. The other issue then becomes, you know, what is a rural community and what is what are we going to have as high-density areas, and how do we get the community more involved than just these one-off discussions like you were pointing out. So we also have on our, when we get into our strategic planning discussions, we are also have on our docket to do that alternative housing review to look at where we need alternative forms of housing in order to try and meet the demand that is out there for RVs and mobile homes and bunkies and all the other forms of housing that people are using nowadays because of the economy. So on both of those sides, both the regional growth strategy and alternative housing, we are going to be into those discussions this year.
Okay, thank you. Director Monteith?
I guess to the chair. So I am sort of torn on this because, you know, they do have a point that they could build a secondary dwelling on that property and still accomplish the same thing. I get the feeling that perhaps the property owner does want to subdivide, perhaps sell the second lot so that he can have 2 separate titles versus 1 title. So I am torn because regardless, that property could still have 2 homes. If it is subdivided with the covenant on it that they would only have the 2 homes on the smaller lot, it's still accomplishing the same thing. So I am torn because I do feel that the property owner is sort of being smart. He's using his land to the best resources. But I am, and I do see your point as well. So I guess I'm really struggling with this one.
Okay, it's a good concern. Director Roberts?
Thank you to the chair. And it might be too late for me to ask that question, but was he stating that the covenant was just on the one, or is it
It
the
would be
covenant
on
coming
both.
on both? Yeah.
So
Thank you.
it would potentially limit it to just 1 home on each property, but they would be of potentially different size allowances though. Any other questions? I see Director Coyne and then Director McCordoff. Director Coyne.
Yeah, the part that really concerns me on this one, if the OCP allows that and promotes it, that's it's kind of what we live and die by is the OCP, isn't it? It just, I don't know it makes me think twice about this one.
Okay, well, that's an interpretation, but I'll ask Mr. Garish for clarification on that. They're the ones that wrote the OCP or had a little more into it, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
Sure. Thank you to the chair. And in fairness to the agent, I think he is selectively reading the area AOCP. It is a new document, and there is a very specific policy statement in there under the Kapula local area that says the regional district does not support rezoning applications to facilitate subdivision for a variety of reasons, one of which is water scarcity and the issue, which has been a long-standing concern amongst residents. So we feel there's the opposite argument. There is no support within the OCP for this particular subdivision. The reference that he's making to small holdings is simply a reflection that there are small holding zones that range in size from 0.25 of a hectare up to 2 hectares in area. It's not a policy advocating for the smallest of those parcel sizes where a parcel happens to be designated as small holdings.
Okay, thank you. Director McCordoff, you had a hand up?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that considering that we're looking at reviewing this topic in the future, I would hate to go ahead with this right now before we have a look at all the implications, such as water, which is the big one, and fire service is another one. And I don't know whether that has anything to do with it or not, but it might. And I think we sort of we need to look at all of the issues carefully before we go ahead with perhaps allowing this. So I think we need to take a wait and see approach on this one and do our homework first. Thanks.
Okay, we'll go to Director Bush.
Yeah, so if we change the OCP here and allowed subdivisions in the future, then we'd be looking at 4 homes on this piece of property. And right now we got a covenant was just going to be 2 homes. So to me, I think it's okay to go ahead with this one. But, if we're going to change it in the future, we're looking at big growth.
I'm not sure that's actually correct, because once you get to a 1 hectare, I don't think you're allowed 2 residences on it anymore.
No, but the other 5-acre lots I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So if they're subdivided, right, can they put 2 houses on it?
It would be 1 per property, but it just depends.
Okay, so, but if it's a 10-acre place, then it would be.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's part of the issue with this development at the start, is that these started out as large lots. I actually think way back when they were 50-acre lots, and then they went down to 10s. Now they're down to 5s, and now the next step, which is this request, is down to 1 hectare or 2.5 acres, and that's not necessarily the best way to go in this situation where there's water scarcity and everything else. But Director Taylor.
I think we're all interested in appropriate housing policies, etc. I just think we need to make that decision with consideration of everything and not deal with it on a one-off basis without due consideration. So for that reason, I'm not ready to make that decision.
Okay. Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question, and this is a rural vote. All those in favor? Oh, you had a Quick. The motion on the floor is to deny. Good point, just so we make sure we know what we're voting on. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Director Bush opposes, so the motion carries. Brings us down to B4, which is a zoning amendment for electoral area C, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So this is on Island Road at the bottom of Sportsman's Bowl, and we have an application to allow a mobile home on a property of less than 4 hectares, which doesn't comply with our zoning bylaw. In this case, it would be an accessory dwelling that would be for family members. And again, it's going to this issue of affordable housing. So we're recommending that we proceed with first and second reading on this and go out to public hearing, Mr. Chair, to hear what the neighborhood has to say. And in that case, the public hearing would be before the board on January 19th.
Okay, I'll go to Director Knodel for direction on this.
Thank you. And through the chair, this is consistent with the direction we've been taking in this area. It's a fairly dense area. So I'd be making the administrative recommendation, please.
Okay, you're moving it, seconding, thank you. Discussion on it? Don't believe, oh, go ahead, Director Johansson.
Thank you, Chair. I talked to Director Knoll about this before, and just my question was on, are they going to put a separate secondary septic system in, or are they going to be tying into the existing septic system? And just wondering how that works with our bylaws where it's not a expansion of a primary residence.
Okay, I'll go to staff first on that. Do we know the answer to that? Is it tying in or separate? Go ahead.
Yes, they would be having a second septic system.
Okay, so a separate septic system. Any other questions? Oh, I see a hand from Director Knodel. Go ahead.
I did talk to the owner yesterday. They're doing an evaluation on their septic to see if they can tie into the existing septic now, just because the cost of a second septic would be quite high. So we kind of have two answers there at this point. I just ran into him. I had a meeting with someone else yesterday and asked that question. So I'm not sure how to evaluate that at this point, but from him, they are looking at an evaluation on the existing septic service. It was a large family dwelling, so I'm going to guess that they won't have a problem with that particular septic service if that's the direction they intend to go. Thank you.
That would depend on when it was constructed, probably, but we'll keep that into consideration. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing no hands, this is a motion to send it to, or give it first and second and send it to public hearing. Again, a rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Over to B5, Official Community Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendment for Electoral Area H, CAO.
Yeah, this is an application for Tulameen, Mr. Chair, where we have a vacant property in a commercial area and the owner wants to build a residence on it, and they need a zoning amendment for that. We're recommending that this be given first and second reading and sent to public hearing before the board on January 19th.
I'll go to Director Coyne for direction.
Yes, I'd like to make the administrative recommendation, please.
Okay, moved, seconded, perfect. Any further discussion on this one? Don't think I'm seeing any hands. This is another rural vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B6, Electoral Area Advisory Planning Commission Bylaw and Policy Amendments, CAO.
So this is a follow-up to our several discussions about how we can best serve the APCs, Mr. Chair, that we've had over the last couple of months. And we've now consolidated those into the bylaw. So we have a bylaw that we're presenting, the Advisory Planning Commission bylaw for 3 readings and adoption. And then because there's a different voting requirement, another resolution on accepting the changes to the Advisory Planning Commission policy, Mr. Chair. So 2 separate ones on that.
Okay. Direction from the board on this?
Yeah, you have to do them separately, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. But we need a motion.
Yeah, on the first one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone's willing to make that first motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the administrative suggestion for the first one.
First one, he's moved, or it's moved. Seconder, thank you. Any discussion on that? Don't believe I'm seeing any hands. These are rural votes again. Call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Looking for a motion on the second portion of that? Someone, this one is corporate vote, so it can be moved by a corporate member as well, if you so desire. I see a mover, I'm assuming, Director Gettins and Director Coyne, so moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? Again, seeing no hands, corporate vote, call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B6. That's just the one I did. B7, I forgot to turn the page. My mistake. CAO delegation bylaw. CAO.
We had this at the board meeting on December 15th, Mr. Chair. This is the delegation of approving authority for the a strata property that's now sitting at third reading, and we're recommending adoption.
Okay. Direction on this? This one is well discussed. I think at our last meeting, it's specifically with strata property, so it's moved. Seconded, thank you. Any discussion needed on this one? Seeing no hands, call the question, and this one is a corporate. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. B8, temporary use permits, delegation of issuance for renewals and reissuance, CAO.
Exactly that, Mr. Chair, and this is back for adoption.
Okay, is there a mover for this one? Moved, seconded, thank you. Any discussion needed on this? Again, seeing no hands, and this is again a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B9.
And then we need the motion on the development procedures.
Second part of that, my mistake there. Looking for a second part of a motion for the second recommendation. Moved, seconded, thank you. Any discussion on this? Again, seeing no hands, call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now down to B9, which is a zoning bylaw amendment in electoral area A, CAO.
Yeah, and this is for the construction of 10 agritourism units, Mr. Chair, and this is back for adoption.
Okay. Looking for direction, recommending the motion, moving it, a seconder. Thank you. Any discussion on it? You're looking for who seconded it?
Yeah, thanks.
I had a hand, I seen. You need to record that? Oh, it was a rural director is what you're looking for? Okay, but.
This is the rural corner over here.
We got quite a few on the screen here too, but I'll use a Director Bob Coyne's hand then if that's needed. Any discussion on this? This is a motion for adoption. It's been before the board a few times, but it's probably new to some of the new directors. So just a quick explanation on it for those that are not familiar with it. Most agritourisms are allowed 5 units on each property. These folks have two properties and wanted to put it on one and are putting a covenant on the other one so that there are no agritourism accommodations allowed on it. So it's moving it on to one rather than two small 5 units. So, any discussion? Seeing no hands, this one is a rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B10, official community plan and zoning bylaw amendments in electoral area I, CAO.
And this is for that 3-lot subdivision on Green Lake Road, Mr. Chair, just outside Okanagan Falls. And there was a requirement for a covenant explaining the donation of land that the owner had indicated in their application. So that is all done now, and this is back for adoption.
Okay, I'll go to Director Monteith. I'm assuming you're moving it. Moved. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. Director Bush, got that one. Any discussion? Again, this is another one of these that's for the new board members may not be familiar with, but if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, seeing no hands, I will call the question. Rural vote, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Page isn't turning here. Down to finance. RDOS 5-year financial plan. CAO.
Yes, so I'm sure you've all read diligently the volumes of documents that came out on this. So again, we apologize for that. That's just our system. So this is the 2023 to 2027 financial plan. Mr. Chair, it's a regulatory requirement for all local governments to submit a 5-year budget. So we've had a number of discussions trying to get to this point, and Mr. Safino is going to present on it. What we're really looking for is first reading so that we can get out for consultation on it. And there is, again, a regulatory requirement for consultation on any 5-year plan. So there's a couple of different issues that Mr. Safino is going to address. One, the budget itself, but then also we've had some proposed changes prior to first reading that we're prepared to answer questions on. And then there's also a request for some early approvals so that we can proceed on some of the more important projects under that budget prior to adoption. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Safino, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. Well, one of the things I just want to discuss is you have received 27 schedules from finance staff and 1 index. The index part is the section that I want to concentrate on right now, which is the changes in the budget that occurred after the December 2nd workshop. So these changes came either from the directors or from staff. The idea was to relook at the budget once discussions are heard from the directors and amendments were made, but the amendments can't be official until after the board approves them. So I had the slide that you see there was originally 64 slides. So I'm going to ask the board if instead of looking at the 64 slides that show all the changes, if you've seen it under Index 1, I could answer questions specifically to your concerns on that. And so that's the first, I think, decision the board has to make. And these decisions were made, there's 4 reasons in the report. The director has requested so that service may be improved or adjust the tax requisition. So that's one of the reasons in the Index 1. New information was received which required the budget to be amended. Under secondary review by management, adjustments have been made so that the budget is more realistic so that it will meet to the 2023 funding and expenditures. And preliminary approval for full-time equivalent and supplemental requests were made. So that's something that the board reviewed, looked at the FTE requests, looked at the supplemental requests, and that's been added. So that changed the original tax requisition. One other thing that I need to point out is the assessment that's in this budget is still the assessment that was for the 2022 budget. I received the BC assessment numbers after this budget was made. It was earlier this week. So at the second reading, the different assessments will adjust, not materially, but it depends on the electoral area municipalities on the increase in assessments. I saw in the paper today that the average was 14%. Now that's for municipalities. I haven't seen the electoral areas, but I will have a detailed report on the effects of the changes on the assessment. So if I can ask if the board is willing to just make an overall acceptance of the index 1 for the changes that was made after December 2nd.
Okay. Direction from the board on that one? Director Monteith, go ahead.
Through the chair, I do have one additional change I'd like to add to that. Is that possible to do this now?
Mr. Safino?
What I would recommend that the changes be made in the second reading. This is just a preliminary. First reading is just as the CAO stated, is to allow us to have the public discussion and come back to the board with whatever recommendations were made. But if you have any changes, we can make them at second reading, and it's not going to be final because you can make changes right up until third reading adoption.
I think Director Monteith doesn't want it going out for consultation, this change that she's proposing. So she wants it to be included in the changes.
So the answer is yes. One of the alternative recommendations is to accept the budget as amended. So whatever you'd like to say right now, I can make it, and that's what I would go out with.
Okay. Do you have a change?
Maybe I'll float it, Mr. Chair. So Director Monteith wants the part-time recreation instructors reduced from $10,104 to $5,075, which is the amount difference between what's proposed for 2023 and what was included in the 2022 budget. And that's for Area I.
Okay.
Staff's writing that down.
They've got that written down. Good. That's a proposed amendment. Any further discussion or questions? Go ahead, Director Conans.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to repeat something I spoke about earlier in the budget process, where I know there's further investment going into the trails system, and I want to make sure that the trail that work is being carried out in all areas of the RDOS, including Penticton, since we're investing quite a bit in it.
Yep. CAO?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I've spoken to the CAO for Penticton, and we're working on that. And then I know our appropriate positions for trails are also working together on it. So we'll have further information later on that.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything further? Oh, Director Federico, go ahead.
Thank you. And again, not through the chair, not sure if this is the right time, but there was an FTE that came forward for a rec coordinator for Area E. So it came forward for 2 days, but I wanted to amend that to 1 day. So I'm not sure if now is the time.
Go ahead, Mr. Safino.
We'll make it happen. If the board approves that.
Okay, so that's a second amendment to add to the list of amendments that we've got in here, or potential changes.
Correct.
So, anything further from the board? Director Gettens, I see a hand online. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just confirming here. So rather than doing the presentation, the board's being asked to approve Index I from our presentation or from our package?
Go ahead.
That's correct. Yeah, unless the board has something specific that you want to bring up on those changes.
I'm more comfortable seeing the presentation, to be honest with you, because I think we've got a couple of changes and yeah, I'd rather have the presentation than rush through it and not have the presentation.
CAO?
Yeah, so there's like 60 pages, mostly administrative, immaterial changes proposed. So we can go through that with the board if you want. I didn't think appropriate or required at a board meeting, but we're certainly prepared to do it.
Okay, if the board wants to go down that route, just Well, we could have a quick straw poll to see where the board sits on it if you wanted. There's one that would like to see it. What's the feeling of the rest of the board? Director Monteith?
To the chair, would it be possible to maybe look at specific ones that maybe we want a little more information on, like sort of targeted versus in general? Because I do have 2 budgets in particular that I do want more information on to make sure that we are hitting some of the errors that I found.
That might be appropriate.
Yes, that can be.
Sure. Okay. Do you want to start us with what ones you wanted to see, Director Monteith?
Yes, thank you. So specifically, I'm looking at the Apex Waste Transfer Station and the Campbell Mountain.
So those were addressed by the manager, and they are on here. Is that as big as it can get, Danny?
I think you can make it a bit. Yeah. That's a little easier to see.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's under refuse disposal. And if I could just, I believe it's, so this is Oliver. See, the refuse disposal budget's pretty well changed. All of it changed. And the area C and D and Campbell Mountain were changed also. So you're looking at which one for the Apex?
Apex Transfer Station?
Yes. Oh, did I miss it?
No.
What's that? Here, you see, okay. See. Okay.
Skipping through here.
There's quite a few here. So here's Economic Development Area I, grant and aid coming up. You can do it from the index. Yeah.
It might be quicker.
This is the same order as the index. So if you look on the second page of, the first page, Apex Solid Mountain Transfer Station, the changes are on the first page. That you see everything from the user fees to the large item user fees changed. And I can find it now because this is in the same order as the index. I just changed my prescription. I haven't got the new one, so it's a little blurry for me. I apologize.
Yeah.
You can see why we recommended that we go through it as a whole. Okay, so here's it's getting near the end.
Oh, went too fast.
Yes.
I think I've seen it.
Yes, it's coming up.
One more.
So this is Apex Solid Waste Transfer Station. It lists the revenue sources, and in this case, the user fees. It lists the expenses. It shows where the changes were made. It shows the original budget, and then the adjustment. The requested adjustment for the large item fees are there. The tipping fees changed. The manager looked at the 2023 budget and amended it accordingly. And he did the same thing with the Campbell Mountain and all of the other landfills.
Okay. What was the other one? Sir. You're okay with that, Director Monteith? All right. And what was the other item you wanted to see?
The Campbell Mountain's on there, right on the screen.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, from what I believe, there's a cost for the collection of that. So that would be the fees collected from there. Mr. Reader would know more than I would, but it's just a collection for the fees, the cost that we would recuperate.
Okay. Anything further?
I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, if we wanted to delve further into this, we could do it in between first and second. Do it more thoroughly.
If it's just to correct the correction or make sure there was changes made that were requested, that's definitely a follow-up between first and second. It can happen there. I see a hand from Director Gettins. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to, are we having more discussion? Like once we approve this Appendix I, is there another budget discussion right after? Like I've got a couple of questions, but it's not necessarily about amendments to the budget.
Well, this isn't approving the I. This is just asking whether we wanted to go through the full presentation or whether we did our homework and read it.
Okay, so but there's more discussion for questions with the budget after this?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. I'll wait till then. Thanks.
Okay. Anything further on the first section of that? Director Taylor, go ahead.
Are we going to see spreadsheets come out with these changes all incorporated into them before second reading that we would then be able to comment on?
Yes, all changes that the board makes will always be updated in the budget for second and then third reading.
Yeah, between each reading, they're updated.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, if you want to move on to the next.
So is the board willing to accept?
Seems we're okay with. Is my missing? Oh, sorry, Martin. I don't see you in the top corner there. Go ahead, Director Johansson.
No worries. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify the requested amendment by Area C Director Knodel to our Shared Services Economic Development, Oliver and Area C. We are having a meeting about this on Monday, so we'll get a better idea of the impacts of that significant change. Just wanting to make sure we're going to have an opportunity to revisit that if there's not agreement there. I guess a question for the CFO.
Go ahead.
The changes we made as directed by the directors. So yes.
Yeah. And that's between, well, after this reading and when we come back for second, if there's a desire to change that, that can always be discussed then.
Thank you.
Any other hands I missed? Oh, Director Gettins? I thought that was maybe a leftover, the one there. Go ahead.
No, thanks. I just would like to remove the community gas works tax for Mariposa Park of the additional amount of $222,000 from the first reading, please.
Okay. They're making notes on that?
Yes.
Okay. Anything further? Oh, your hand is up again there, Director Gettins, or would you? Oh. All right. Let's go on to the next section.
So I'll just start the presentation then. Because of what we've eliminated this, it's very short now. Oop. So as I stated earlier, the first reading allows staff to be able to go out along with the directors for public consultation. We've made a few commitments with municipalities and electoral areas starting next week. I've been asked to confirm. I couldn't really confirm until after the first reading, but after this meeting, and the board does the first reading, I'll confirm all the meetings. And within the next 2 weeks, I'm hoping to get all of the 16 areas. Penticton Indian Band is also included in that because there is some fees that they pay. So the presentation, they've always been asked or if they want to invite staff. So with that, I just wanted to do a comparison of the budget between 2023 and 2022. You'll see that as far as the operational budget's 46.3 versus 42.5, that's a just over $3.8 million increase, and I actually split it up in the report to show you where the differences are. The increase in the municipal debt is because some municipalities actually increased their debt. Princeton, Osoyoos are the two major ones. The next section actually shows why there's an increase in the operational costs. And I've highlighted the differences. It's in your report from the staff from me. And if you add them all up, there's a 3.8 million. Now, one of the things I do want to emphasize is the budget includes just over $4 million of transfers to reserves. That's the transfers to the 192. Not all 192 have transfers, but a lot of them do. The biggest two would be the landfills. Being Campbell Mountain would be one of the largest transfers. That's, I believe it's I've got it here. It's just over a 9% of the operational cost of transfer to reserves, which is really good. It's just the only thing is that you have to look at each of the 192 and see if there's an appropriate amount, and that's something that we're looking at so that we can come back to the board and say yes, it's a reasonable amount. So the next section is capital. The capital budget's just over 20 million, and 222,000 of that is administration costs. So the board changed the policy in 2022 where the administration cost was 20%. It's now 12%. The additional 8% was added on to operational costs. This is the administration fee. To be transparent, I always want to show the differences between 2023 and 2022. The increases that you see on the far right isn't the increase in the taxes, it's the increases in the budget. For the largest one is information services. And it's not necessarily that it's a huge increase in the operational costs. A lot of times it may be the funding part of it. So if the funding part is reduced, the tax increase is increased. This is the portion, how the member municipalities and electoral areas, it's distributed, how they pay for the services. In BC, it's assessment, and assessment dictates how much you pay. So yes, Penticton pays 10.51 of the total tax requisition. And that's because they have the largest population and an increase in assessment. This is something that I started 2 years ago, where it shows the tax requisitions per capita. And again, the larger the population, the lower your tax assessment. You'll see that Penticton, Naramata, and OK Falls, for instance, are one of the three highest that pay for the taxes. However, Danny, can you make that a little smaller?
It skipped up to a 249% magnification.
Well, if you look at the bottom, you'll see that while Penticton is one of the highest in paying for taxes, it's the third lowest in per capita. So that's just something I thought would be meaningful to the directors. And to be transparent, this is so it shows the actual taxes. So you see the 2.5 million to fund the 2023 operational budget, and then total is 23,964,000 for 2023. So if the board adopts this for first reading, that's what you're adopting now. It doesn't mean that's going to be the final. I've already had meetings since this has come out with directors, and in some cases the directors have asked for some adjustments. So you will see some adjustments made subsequent to this meeting. And just something else I added, this shows if the budget is passed and adopted as it is now, and it's going to change as we discussed, that's what the different household value would pay. So you'll see that Penticton, $96.98, for instance, for a 500,000. I did it in $100,000 increments so that it's rare that a house will be worth exactly those amounts, but you can extrapolate. So someone could take a look and say, this is what it would be for the regional district share. One thing I just want to remind the directors, the electoral areas will be charged an extra 5.25% by the surveyor of taxes. So but for the privilege of them doing our taxes and collecting the taxes on our behalf. So that 5.25% equals, I'm extrapolating just over $800,000 it will be for that the taxpayers for the electoral areas have to pay. Next steps, as I stated, after first reading, public engagement will take place. There's quite a few that'll be phoning this afternoon to confirm. There's going to be also some videos taped so that those that can't come to the live meetings can actually go onto our webpage and see what we have to say. And continue the next steps. The directors are invited to meet with staff, so that's something that I'll be asking if you want to meet with us to discuss any changes. And the surplus review. So that's one of the things that we do the budget is staff has to look at and extrapolate and guesstimate what the surplus will be. I'm always a very conservative person. I do a worst case scenario. So I would hope that I can come back to you and say the surplus will be higher. It's not going to make a major change on the tax requisition because of the new process that we have where the surplus is on the revenue side, but we have the transferred reserves on the expense side. So I could actually, if I make a mistake and put $1 million on the revenue side, I put $1 million on the operational transfers too. It's an in and an out. So all I need to, if I change one number, I change the other number, so it evens out. So the next continued budget, I'm looking at taking it to the board for final reading on March 2nd. By legislation, we have to have it by the end of March, which is different dates. Municipalities are May 14th. And the recommended motion in your report is that the changes requested as listed in Appendix 1 on the January 5th financial plan be approved, and that the bylaw 2988-2023 Regional District of Okanagan Local Mean 5-year plan be read a first time.
As amended.
As amended.
Because we do have a couple of amendments.
It would be the alternate motion now.
Yeah. Okay. There's a mover for that. Is there a seconder? It's moved and seconded, so it's on the floor. Discussion. We've had several budget meetings and the majority have attended, and we'll have more for sure. Well, more discussion on this, but if you've got some questions, I don't think now I can see the folks online a little easier. You were just off on that side, so I couldn't necessarily see you very good. Now we do. Director Monteith, go ahead.
To the chair, I was reviewing the reserve budgets, and I specifically I was looking at the 911 operating budget, and I'm wondering why we have such a large reserve for that system.
The 911? Mm-hmm. Mr. Safino, can you answer that, or?
I'd have to get back to you and talk to the manager. So that's something, if it's all right.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what's in there either, Mr. Chair. I know that we do have a telecommunications study approved for this year. So whether that's in the reserve, I'm not sure. Or whether we have limits set on our reserves, but we can check on that.
Okay. I can't remember either why or where it's at, but that's worth getting some feedback on in the future or clarification on in the future, where it's at and why. Any other questions, Director Monty or Director Gettins?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks. It doesn't have to be answered now, but I am curious to know how the IT, the new IT is put throughout all of the budget. So this is for IT support, so I believe it's people, and I can't figure out how budgets are determined for each area. So for me, I've got two water system. One is Falder. Falder's going to go up by $6,700 for IT support. And that's a smaller budget, like a $200,000 budget. But West Bench Water, for example, is a lot larger budget and just a little bit more of IT support. And the consequence, of course, for Falders, there's only 80 people paying for this water. So their budget's going to go up by about 4% for the IT cost. And I would just like to know, and I recognize that we need to invest in our IT, but I would like to know how that was determined and why some water systems don't have any IT budget. So I'm curious about that. And then I also just wanted to make sure that we will review the carry forwards. It's a request that was made at the strategic planning meeting to figure out why we've got so much carry forward and how the work plan is going to be, so we get the work from last year done plus any new work done for this year.
Okay. Mr. Safino?
I could bring that back at second reading, if that's all right.
Answered
Yes.
that question then? Sure. She's nodding her head yes. Any other questions or discussion on this first reading of the budget? This just allows it basically now to go out for public consultation and to get presentations to the municipalities if they so desire, and areas if you so want it as well in your communities. Seeing no more hands, we do have the motion on the floor for first reading. Obviously, it's a corporate vote, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Yes, there is, the next portion is for the early approval. So I'll go to the CAO on that just to introduce this one.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So as Mr. Safino indicated, we won't adopt our budget until March, hopefully the first meeting in March, but if not, absolutely the second meeting. And there are some projects, we have 6 projects identified, either purchases or acquisitions that would benefit by starting now instead of waiting until April. So we have identified those 6 in the report, and we're asking for the board's approval to start those now.
So it's early approval for those to be acted
Yes.
on in the budget. So is there someone ready to make that motion? Moved, a seconder, thank you. Any discussion on this? There's just the 6 projects that's in the report. Any questions? Oh, sorry. Did you have your hand up too, or you were, okay, go ahead, Director Conans.
Yeah, through the chair. I'm sure that we talked about this a bit before, but with the electric cargo van, how do we have a cap on how much that could increase in cost if delivered late? Or I've heard that a lot of deliveries are late with these vehicles and that they're doubling in costs at times. Maybe not double, but
Increasing.
a lot increasing.
Mr. Safino?
The managers would only be allowed to purchase up to what the board accepts for the budget. The cap would be the budget. If it's increased, they would have to be brought back to the board for approval. And at that time, it could be moved forward or stopped.
Okay, so we're setting the max.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, again, this is a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us down to Caledon Volunteer Fire Department Primary Pumper Purchase, CAO.
So this is one of those early approvals that you just gave us, Mr. Chair. So the Caledon Fire Department is intending to purchase a primary pumper, and they have the money in reserve. And we are recommending that we award that to Hub Fire Engines for a maximum of $930,400.
Director Monteith is moving it? Moved. Thank you. Seconder, thank you. Any discussion on this one? Seeing no hands. Again, this is corporate. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us down to legislative services, our strategic plan for 2022 to 2026. CAO.
Yeah, so we had an initial discussion about our strategic plan on December 10th, Mr. Chair, and we're going to have more of those. I indicated at the time that the board has adopted a strategic planning cycle and a process. And obviously, because we're on a calendar year, it's a busy time for us finishing off the 2022 business plan and the starting on the 2023 plan. So that was the purpose of that workshop. But yeah, sure. Yeah, so we have three documents that we produce out of our strategic planning process. The first is a strategic plan, and we base that on a 4-year term, concurrent with the term of the existing board of directors. So obviously it would be interesting for any new board coming in to set their own guiding principles. So for us, on our cycle, our guiding principles are entrenched in the strategic plan. So that is our vision, mission. I'm just about to lose Director Taylor, I can see right now. That's our vision, mission, values, and key success drivers. And then our goals as well. So we set 4-year goals because really we need a target in order to shoot for, to try and accomplish. So typically what I do is I bring it through committee, but all I'm really interested in at this point is, and I have a couple of things I'm going to point out to you in the strategic plan. It's a very high level document, and I wanted to get some indication as to whether this board of directors wants to have a further discussion about the guiding principles, like the vision, the mission, the values, or the key success drivers, or whether we're more interested in the second document, which is our corporate business plan, which talks about what we're going to do in 2023 to achieve our vision, mission, values, and key success drivers. So that's the, if we do, we aren't going to do that today, but we will bring it back shortly to have that sort of a discussion. What I found in the past is that the elected officials are more interested in, because these are very generic statements, is what we're more interested in is what we're going to tackle in 2023. We will have another discussion on February 22nd, 23rd, when we're bringing Mr. McIntosh back in to talk about sort of the higher level, the longer term projects. So this is a dynamic process for us. We don't stop really our strategic planning cycle. We're always going. We'll start working on 2024 in the summer. That's when we start administratively looking at the next year. But what I wanted to do is to get some indication on the 2022 to 26 plan, Mr. Chair. I thought what I'd point out initially, though, and I know I see I've given Director Wiebe German ancestry. I've called him Wiebe, so I'll correct that. But other than that, I think unless we want to propose a change in these higher level guiding principles, that it would be safe for the board to approve the strategic plan, and then we can start working on the business plan. What I wanted to point out was the left-hand column on this page 6. This is our accountability framework. One of the higher level requirements for an elected group is oversight. So what you want to do is not it's that noses in, fingers out principle, the governance requirement on a board of directors as opposed to the implementation that administration does. So this is what we have now as far as processes that the board carries out that oversight on their administration. Always for elected officials, your report card is your 4-year election cycle. So that's typically where you get a lot of feedback as to how we're doing administratively, as well as you as the representative of a certain constituency. So that is always part of our accountability framework. We're always keeping that in mind. We have that obligation to submit a rolling 5-year financial plan annually. That certainly is a primary oversight opportunity for an elected group. There is a requirement, again, a regulatory requirement for an independent financial audit for all local governments. And we do that on an annual basis. That is an independent auditor that we contract to come in and do that for us, which you'll be seeing. We'll get the 2022 audit probably in May, and we'll bring the auditors in to present that to the board. Each quarter, we'll bring in a variance report that will show the difference between actual to budget for that current financial year. And that's always a good indication for us as to whether we're meeting the direction the board sets out in the budget and that you can hold us accountable for. We have, I mean, our primary legislation is the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, but we have dozens of pieces of legislation that we're held accountable for. So in every report that we bring, there's usually a reliance on some piece of legislation like an act or a regulation or in the board's case, a bylaw or a policy. We'll always refer to those, and that's your assurance that we're taking into account that regulatory framework. You'll see when we bring the 2023 business plan in for discussion, which I'm hoping to do shortly, if not on January 19th and certainly in February, that we're proposing a citizen satisfaction survey for 2023. And that's a good way for the board to get specific feedback from citizens on how we're doing. We always ask the same 2 questions. We ask a lot of questions, but we always ask whether our citizens believe they're getting good value for taxes and whether they're getting, they believe they're receiving good service from the regional district. So we can present the longitudinal results on that. More and more, social media is becoming, I mean, social media is a beast of its own, but more and more we start to rely on that as a mechanism to get information out, and we also receive information in. So we've been growing our presence on social media. We've still got a ways to go, and that's certainly part of communications under legislative services, but that's also a way that we get feedback from our citizens. It's one of those environmental scanning tools that are very important for local governments now. The corporate business plan, that's where we'll come in quarterly and we'll give you an update on how we're doing against your 2023 projects. So you'll get that. The second meeting after the end of every quarter, which is why January 19th is likely to be a longer meeting, is because in each of our committees we'll not only have activity reports, but we'll also give you an update on how you did against the 2022 business plan. The risk management plan, I mean, it's always good for any organization or a business for that matter to do an enterprise risk management plan. So for us, that would mean, when I say enterprise, that just means we risk everything against our 9 areas. So typically what that requires is that we'll identify, usually through a SWOT analysis, we'll identify what the threats are. We'll evaluate them against the rating scale that we've developed, and we'll develop a mitigation plan to try and reduce the risk on those higher risk areas, and then we'll re-rate them. So we'll bring that into the board. We usually do that in the spring. We didn't do it, we don't do it every year, but I think we will do it in 2023 because new board, and it's been a while since we've done it. So we'll do that. And then, as I mentioned, we give you an activity report every quarter. We're going to be doing our citizen survey. In addition to that, we'll pick out certain services or processes in the organization, and we'll do a quality assurance survey on those customers that have used a specific service. And that gives us good information on how we're doing. And then, of course, I haven't added it in, but I will, is the Chief Administrative Officer Performance Review is the way that the board evaluates how their administration is doing. So we'll add that in as well. So, and then other than that, this just shows how this accountability framework fits into our legislative and administrative structures, Mr. Chair. But other than that, if you've read through the document, you'll see that the vision, mission, values, and key success drivers are documented in there. If we did want to do anything on the guiding principles, I'd probably recommend it be the values. We have 5 values that the board of directors adopted, I think back in around 2012 now. And values are those intrinsic beliefs that the organization holds dearly. It's the board saying, this is how we want you to carry out our day-to-day business. It's how we make those values-based decisions that administration is expected to do. So if we did want to do a portion of the guiding principles, that would be probably my pick. But other than that, Mr. Chair, I was hoping to get adoption of the strategic plan.
Okay. Direction from the board on this? Director Roberts is moving it. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Seconded. Director Bush. Any discussion on it? Director Holmes?
I guess the thing I struggle a bit with the key success drivers and the strategic goals is that they seem so high level that they can almost mean anything to anybody, and you know, and so what it is, what actually are our goals here? That's what I still struggle with. A couple of them are very specific, like delivering a broad array of IT, enable tools, and executing well-defined strategic planning. Those are very specific compared to the other goals. But even though I question, are those really goals, or are they just ways of achieving goals? You know, so you know, I personally struggle with a lot of this, and it doesn't really just tell me where it is as an organization that we're going, what it is that we want to achieve. I look at this and I say, I don't know what our goals are. So.
CAO, you want?
Yeah, so the goals come in the business plan, and what we'll do there. So it's a cascading system that we use in our strategic planning process. The key success drivers really are bins. What we want to do is make sure that in achieving our vision, mission, values, is that we cover the whole organization. So our first key success driver, high performing organization, is internally focused. It's what we have to do within our organization in order to move us forward to achieve those guiding principles. The second one, based on the customer experience, is externally focused. And so that's where things like a citizen survey would come out, or communications, or whatever we can do to improve customer service. And then the third one on sustainability is those 3 pillars of sustainability. So anything that we want to do in 2023 that would have either a social, economic, or environmental benefit to help us achieve our guiding principles would be in KSD 3. And the fourth one, the board actually put in probably a couple terms ago now, and it was based on what the board needs to do in order to provide that governance and oversight in a representative democracy. So that's where we would put anything as far as whether it's where the election would go, which was in our previous business plan, and it's where we put our strategic planning process, which really is owned by the board. And then also any orientation or training or relationship activities would also fit in there as well. So that's the intent, is that the strategic plan sort of stops there. And then when we bring the business plan forward, that will have specific goals, but again, larger in nature. And then underneath each of those goals, we'll have objectives. And then under each of those objectives, we'll have performance indicators. And when we get to that level, we identify specifically who's responsible, what the measurement is for success, or usually for us it's a date. And then the board can have more detailed discussions at that level. And then every quarter, we'll bring in a corporate action plan giving you a progress report against those objectives and performance indicators.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion on this, Director Conant?
Through the chair. So sorry if I just wonder where these specific goals would be, because what I see that we have a few things really in common here, really in common. And one of them is, for example, came up today, is affordable housing or housing. So are the objectives that we're looking at, do they address that? For example, again, the issue that came up today, which was an issue that was part of a bigger issue about what are we going to do about housing getting too expensive for people to live here. So that's, for example, one issue. Another one would be, we all have in common is serious crime. And so that's a specific issue that we should be, I think, following when we address things that come forward, or how do we address that really high crime rate? And just a couple things I'm throwing out. Where would things like that come in your cascading system, in our cascading system?
CAO?
So that would be at the objective level. I mean, the alternative housing study came up during the strategic planning workshop back in 2021, and we didn't have the opportunity to address it in 2022. So it will automatically, it's in the parking lot, it'll automatically show up at a higher priority level in your 2023 business plan. And then that would, for those higher level projects, like if you want to do a crime prevention plan or program, that would be where we discuss those projects, what their priority is, and whether they fit within budget. For us, it's always, if something's in the business plan, it has to be reflected in budget. If it's in the budget, it's got to be in the business plan.
That's great, thanks.
Okay. Anything further? Seeing no hands, we'll call the question. Again, corporate, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Brings us over to OK Falls Conversion Service Establishment, CAO.
So the Okanagan Falls Irrigation District indicated back in 2021 that they were interested in dissolving. So the four services that they carried, they wanted to transfer over to the regional district. So that was the water service, street lighting, the cemetery, and Centennial Park. So throughout 2022, we've been working with the irrigation district, and at their annual general meeting in April of last year, they did move to dissolve at the end of 2022, and we proposed to take over the system on I believe we actually took it on January 1st, but probably January 3rd. It transferred over. So typically in that sort of a process, we inherit all of their bylaws, and then we gradually bring them over into a regional district form. So the other requirement then is that when they dissolve, and they get their order in council allowing them to dissolve, then we have to establish the service which is our mechanism for funding. It sets out the geographic area of the service, and it sets out the revenue recovery process. So for each of those 4 services, there were different rate bases, so different geographic areas, and that's why we had to have 3 separate service establishments for water, street lighting, and the cemetery. The park, we were just able to put into the Okanagan Falls Parks and Recreation Service. So we didn't need a separate establishment bylaw for that. And then also, when assuming responsibility for a new service, from a different group, or in this case, whether it's private or quasi-public, the province is very cautious about how reserves come out, because the money raised in each of those reserves comes from a different rate base. So you can't spend money that came from a certain group of citizens on some service that benefits somebody else. So that's why you see the proliferation of, bylaws, Mr. Chair. So the first part of it is the service establishment bylaw. So we have the 3 bylaws there. So this is the water service, the street lighting service, and the cemetery service that are all sitting at 3 readings, and they're now ready for adoption. And then we also want permission to apply to that, to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs for that restructuring implementation grant. So that is our recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Director Taylor, direction on this?
I'd move all, I'd move all 4.
Yeah, you can. They can fall under one. So it's moved, seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Director Bush, go ahead.
Yeah, so when the regional district takes over a irrigation district, is there still like an advisory committee or something like similar to Parks and Recs, or do we lose that?
Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't, and I'm not sure in this case. CAO?
Yeah, that's discretionary, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Seeing no hands, this one is a corporate vote. Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. D3, which is about the reserves, as the CAO discussed. Do you want to add anything further, or should we just get a direction?
Yeah, just that this may seem a little complex, but because the irrigation district has already got these reserves set up, we have to take them in their current form. So there's a capital reserve, there's an operating reserve for the water system, then there's also a water service capital expenditure reserve. And while it would seem to make sense that the capital just be one reserve, that's what they have now.
So we got to take
transfer the money, that's what we have to accept. So we've got the water service with 3 reserves, we got the 1 reserve for street lighting, and then we've got the 3 reserves for the Okanagan Falls Cemetery, one of which is that perpetual care fund.
Okay. Again, go to Director Taylor.
I'd move acceptance of all of these. I think they're what's necessary in order to operate, and we've already made the decision, and we've taken these things on, so I'd move them all.
Okay, it's moved, seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on this? I think in all the years that I've been here at the regional district, it isn't often we get much in reserves. So this is kind of nice to see that the community did well there.
They did.
It means they did a good job up to the point where they thought it was too much for them. So, all right, seeing no other hands, call the question. Again, corporate, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. I believe that brings us down to CAO reports. Anything there, CAO?
I just wanted to point out, Mr. Chair, that next week on January 12th, we're over at the Convention Center. Mr. Reese Harding from Young Anderson is coming in to talk about responsible conduct for elected officials, which is now a regular statutory requirement for all local governments to at least consider a code of conduct. And if you have one, then you should discuss it on an annual basis, and if you don't, you need to start working on one. So Mr. Harding is an expert on this. He's worked with UBCM through their whole process over years and years of discussion about responsible conduct. And he'll come in. The morning, what we're proposing is that he can give his presentation on what a good code of conduct would look like. He'll advise us on that UBCM master template for codes of conduct. And then in the afternoon, we're going to be doing some workshops, so round tables, to start looking at ours and to discuss what would be best for us. So this is, again, one of those broader ones where we're inviting all of our municipal councils and the CAO group, and we look forward to a good day on that. And then on the 20th of January, we're bringing in Tracy Lorenzen. About a year ago, we started, out of our staff perception survey, we found that customer service was, I mean, we always have a concern about consistency across our 9 departments within the organization, and we found that we weren't being consistent. This is what our staff tells us, and they're the ones that know. So we undertook a customer service improvement program in 2022, and Tracy Lorenzen, a consultant, was retained in order to do that. So we've been working diligently on that administratively over the last year, and now it's the board's turn. So we're going to bring you into the loop, and she'll present to you on how we're doing, and you can see what your part is on that as well. So that's on the 20th. That's a Friday, I believe. So again, at the convention center, and again, open to the broader group. So, and then other than that, we do a staff perception survey every November, December. So at the end of our calendar year, we ask our staff how we're doing. Back in 2008, the board adopted the 8 characteristics of high-performing organizations, and we ask our staff to measure our organization against those 8 characteristics. So we've got a good longitudinal statistics on how we do, and then we talk about the correlation between the staff perception survey and the citizen perception survey, and that there should be that correlation as the organizational climate increases, so should the citizen perception of service. So I'm going to present to the board on that. From time to time, we have asked our board if they want to play. You know, I'll present to you. You can see what that involves, and then I'll see if you want to play along with us. It's a 32-question survey that really measures our organizational climate, so it might be something the board's interested in. So just a heads up on that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Moving on here, other business chair's report. Not a lot to report over the Christmas holiday break. I would just hope everybody had a good time with family and visiting those that may have come in town and seen everybody. And I will extend my best wishes to everybody for the new year and hope that 2023 can only be better than what we've had in the past. So looking forward to that. Director's motions. I believe I had someone, Director Fedrigo had her hand up. Quick, go ahead.
Thank you to the chair. So UBCM currently has open a poverty reduction planning and action grant. So as a municipality or regional district on your own can apply for up to $25,000, or if you are in with at least one other municipality, you can apply for up to $150,000. So we can look at applying under the planning stream. That would then enable us to look at some of the affordable housing options, so mental health, social supports, put together sort of a plan. So if that's on our table for this year, there may be some funding to be able to assist us in doing so. And so I'm not sure motion or just putting that out there that staff to look into this grant and how we may be able to apply for it.
Okay. Director Bush?
Yeah, so how soon does this, do we need to vote on this today or?
No, I don't believe so. This is
Not
just a
time
notice of motion. I think it closes
It closes
when?
March 17th.
Okay, so there is some time there. Director Taylor?
Just having worked with Penticton on this, I strongly support or encourage at least looking at the larger one on a sort of South Okanagan, Similkameen basis with the city of Penticton and the other municipalities.
Okay. So this will come back, the meeting January 19th, if I'm not mistaken. So we can look forward to that there. Any other directors' motions? I don't think I'm seeing any on the screen. So board members' verbal updates. Anything you want to, announcements from your communities or anything you think is interesting to the board? Go ahead, Director Fedrigo.
Thank you through the chair. So our fire department and another resident in our community organized a polar bear dip. So it was the first annual one in Naramata. We had over 75 people bravely go into the lake. And we had about 200 or so people that just came down, and it was a wonderful way to ring in the new year. And they raised over $1,000 for our firefighter society. Yeah,
cool.
fun day.
Too cold for me, but I'm not quite a polar bear dipper. Anybody else have any announcements or verbal updates from their areas? Seeing none, that brings us to the end of the agenda. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned, and thank you, everybody. Now,